The Detroit Lions picked up a much needed win against the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football and now are 6-2 on the year. Let's talk about some of the biggest takeaways to come out of that game, as well as what this win could mean for the Lions as they prepared for the second half of the season following their bye week. What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, and in today's video, I know it's a little bit late, but we are once again going to be doing our breakdown of some of the biggest takeaways that I had from the Lions win over the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football, where they beat the Raiders 26-14. And I said this on Twitter, and I'm going to say it here in this video, and we'll talk about it a little bit closer to the end of this video. But this wasn't the cleanest game that I believe that the Lions have played this year, but a win is still a win, like I typically say. And even though it may not have been the best game or the perfect game from beginning to end, there were still a number of great performances in this game that I want to highlight and basically talk about how these things can, translate to more success for the Lions as they start to go into their bye week this week and can prepare for the rest of the year following their bye. So with that said, let's kick it off with the number one thing that stood out, not just to me, but I'm sure to a lot of Lions fans, especially people who were waiting to see Jahmyr Gibbs break out, because that's exactly what we got on Monday Night Football. With David Montgomery still out with that injury, this put Jahmyr Gibbs at center stage to be able to get a bulk of the carries and actually be able to showcase what he is able to do and why the Lions were able to draft him so high this past draft. And I think he did just that, being able to total 152 rushing yards with a touchdown, averaging 5.8 yards per carry. But probably the most important thing that came out of this game, or the most important stat to me in this game, is his 102 yards after contact. That is a portion of Jahmyr Gibbs' game that he definitely had in there, but it's not something that was highly touted even throughout his draft process. He was known as the speedster. He was a guy that we expected, to get a lot of outside runs and be able to beat guys with his, athleticism, his agility, and his speed. But he also showed in this game that, listen, when he was met, with contact, when guys tried to tackle him, he was able to basically bounce off of those tackle attempts and still be able to keep those legs churning and picking up additional yards. And one of the best things about that game, and not just, his stat line, but his overall performance, is that the moment never looked too big. It's one thing to get the bulk of the carries in like your first, well, not maybe not his first, but in another start in your rookie year. It's another thing that every time that you kind of touch the ball, it almost looked like you looked so comfortable and just understood where to be, how to follow your blocks, and how to be able to hit gaps and be able to find chunk plays, like I said, averaging 5.8 yards per carry. And that's with him just running the ball. He also was able to pick up over 30 yards receiving as well. Again, showcasing that dual threat ability. And one of the reasons why the Lions decided to draft him so high. Currently, Gibbs is only the second rookie this year to put up over 150 yards rushing, the other being the running back in Miami. And so, listen, I know there were people that were kind of low on Gibbs, wondering why we would waste a draft pick on him, or as they would consider wasting a draft pick on him. But I think the Lions knew what they were doing all along. They've been very upfront about, listen, not trying to put too much of a workload on him, not trying to put too much wear and tear on him. And when he was finally, when they had no other choice but to give him more snaps because of the, injury to the running back room, he delivered. And it's something that I expect to kind of continue even after the bye, even after David Montgomery is healthy, because he showcased the ability to not only be able to handle those tough running yards, but also show the ability to still be effective on all the other things that they ask him to do in either the receiving game or on some of the outside runs as well. And so, yeah, it shouldn't be a huge surprise that Jahmyr Gibbs is the first player that I'm going to talk about in this video. But this type of performance is one that I think will catapult him throughout the rest of this season. And yes, when David Montgomery gets back, they are going to split carries. But I do think he gave the Lions enough confidence to be able to trust him getting more rushing attempts and being able to do more in this offense, even once Demo gets back. Now, another big performance that I did want to highlight from this game, and it's another big takeaway that I was able to, get from this win over the Raiders, is the elevated play that we're getting out of Alim McNeill. Going into this year, we all, and I feel like we even said this last year, but a lot of people were saying like, hey, this is going to be Aleem's year. He came into training camp. He talked about how he was, trimmed some body fat, was still able to retain his power, was still able to retain his agility, but he just felt that he would be a more effective pass rusher. And I'm not gonna lie, through those first 2 weeks of the season, it didn't really show up in the way that we thought it would. But I can honestly say since that Seattle game, Aleem has been on a tear and he's found ways to be very effective in the middle. And I know as Lions fans, we like to talk about, the pressures that Aiden Hutchinson is creating, and Hutch has been doing a great job all year. But I think there's a lot of praise that should be given to Aleem as well and what he's been able to do in the middle of that defense and being more of an attack style defensive tackle. One of the sacks that he picked up on Monday night actually came off of him splitting a double team. And it was just perfect the way that he was able to do that and still be able to get to the quarterback and pick up, I believe that was his second sack of the day. Aleem has definitely grown his game from what we saw last year, where he really had just honestly, in my opinion, one dominant performance against the Giants. But so far this year, like I said, since that Seattle game, I think he's just been able to continue to stack up strong performances week after week. And going into this game against the Raiders, to be able to pick up 2 sacks, to be able to get 4 pressures, which tied Aiden Hutchinson for the most of this on this Lions team, is a huge sign of improvement for Aleem. And I'm only expecting even more great things from him as the rest of this year goes on. Listen, we talk about how Hutch needs more help on the opposite edge, and that may be true. But if he's getting a good amount of help from Aleem in the middle, opposing offenses are going to have to still determine how they want to block this defensive line, because you're going to have a guy that can create havoc in the middle. You absolutely have a guy in Aiden Hutchinson that can create havoc on the edge. And then you have these linebackers in Anzalone, Jack Campbell, or Derek Barnes that can also blitz at any given time, and that can cause you issues as well. It's not a star edge rusher by any means, but I still think Aleem has been playing really good football as of lately, and this game against the Raiders was probably his best performance of the year so far. Speaking of other breakout performances, I gotta give a lot of credit to both Jerry Jacobs and Cam Sutton in how they were able to lock down the Las Vegas Raiders wide receivers in this game. If you caught the film breakdown that Morgan and I did last week, you will have noticed that we were really hyped up on, or at least very concerned about, the performance of both Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers and what type of problems that could cause for the Lions cornerbacks if the Lions weren't able to get a ton of pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo, which, they were able to do that. So I guess in a way, it kind of limited the impact that the wide receivers were able to have. But at the same token, both Sutton and Jacobs did a really good job of at least limiting the impact that both those wide receivers were able to have. And if you go probably back and watch some of the tape, Jerry Jacobs probably had the better game because he was able to not give up a single reception. Cam Sutton did give up some receptions, and he was beat a few times on some deep routes that, again, it's Devontae Adams, and that's just kind of going to happen with a guy that's such a savvy route runner. But all things considered, none of those deep routes that Devontae ran ever turned into touchdowns, and Cam was able to at least still give him fits and at least not make it an easy day for him. These are two corners that, again, going into the year, much like Aleem, while we expected this to be an upgrade, and just like with Aleem, we expected him to be better, we still weren't sure how much better. And that's very much the case with both Jacobs and Sutton. We knew that the cornerback room was going to be better, but we just weren't quite sure how much better. There was even talks about whether the Lions really had a true number one corner on this team. And I feel like, this far into the season with the team sitting at 6-2, I think it's fair to say that both Cam Sutton and Jerry Jacobs have played above what we thought they would. And Cam Sutton specifically has definitely at least played like a number one corner. Maybe not, a star number one corner like some of the others in the league, but he's definitely a corner that you can trust, and the Lions trust him to take on the number one wide receiver of the opposing team and play them tough. And I think that's something that he's done very well. Jerry Jacobs has, shaken off the slow start that he's had this season and has just found ways to continue to be competitive without drawing penalties, which I think is also the biggest thing for Jerry Jacobs, is that he's able to still play his physical style of play, but not hurting the team with getting, pass interference or defensive holding type of penalties. If these two corners are able to not only play this well, but stay healthy, it really does lend itself to this defense being able to continue to play at a high level, especially once they come out of this bye and having to play another good quarterback and another good crop of wide receivers and what the Los Angeles Chargers have. Now, with all that said, let's go into my final takeaway from this game. And I kind of talked about it at the top of this video. And listen, I'm not trying to nitpick a 12-point win because the Lions were heavily dominant in this game throughout. At no point in time did it ever really feel like the Lions didn't have a chance to win it. But I can also sit here and say, and I think we could all kind of agree, they did allow the Raiders to hang around much longer than they needed to due to turnovers and just simple mistakes that they were making, and even some play calling decisions that Ben Johnson was making with the Lions in the red zone, leading to them getting more field goals than touchdowns. Listen, again, not nitpicking, not trying to, be critical of a win, but we know with this team now sitting at 6-2, having the other half of their season still ahead of them, getting to the playoffs is still a challenge. Yes, Minnesota is going to be a little bit more beatable now that Kirk Cousins is out for the season with his Achilles injury. Yes, the Bears are the Bears, and they're probably not going to be very good. Green Bay looks like a complete disaster, but you still want to be able to be in contention, possibly for that number 2 seed. And in order for that to happen, the Lions are going to have to find ways to keep themselves from making these types of mistakes, from throwing silly interceptions, from being able to give up, fumbles, whether they're a questionable fumble in the case of Craig Reynolds or a very obvious one in Josh Reynolds. So no matter who it is, this team is going to have to play better in terms of limiting turnovers and specifically, and I think this is probably the bigger point, being able to convert in the red zone, even when you don't have a David Montgomery and you can't just pound the rock into the end zone. You're going to have to find ways of trusting these wide receivers or giving these wide receivers and your tight ends opportunities to be open. And listen, Ben Johnson has been doing a great job. So by no means am I saying that he can't come up with some creative plays to help them convert more touchdowns. And I also don't want to discredit the effort that the Las Vegas Raiders were giving. But given the fact that this is a team that we're used to being more automatic in the red zone, what we saw on Monday is definitely something that going into the second half of the season, they're going to have to be better at. If you go into a game against the Los Angeles Chargers and you play that style of football, that's a team that's a little more dangerous. Their quarterback is more dangerous in a Justin Herbert than a Jimmy Garoppolo. Their defense is a little bit more stingy than probably what we saw in the Las Vegas Raiders as well. Simply put, this team is still going to have to be able to limit those mistakes so that they don't give other teams opportunities to beat them or even put themselves in position where officiating becomes a concern in some of these games. This Lions team is in a great position right now, 6-2, and I think they have the pieces and I think they do have the momentum to be able to continue to have a strong push to the end of the year. But games like this are the types of things like you can't afford to have messy games in the playoffs. You're going to have to be more sound. You're going to have to play cleaner from beginning to end if you're going to be able to expect to beat the teams that you could end up facing in the playoffs. So with that said, those are some of my biggest takeaways to come out of the Lions win over the Las Vegas Raiders. If you're looking for some information or some breakdowns of the Lions decisions that they made on the trade deadline, I do plan on diving into that on a separate video because I do believe there's a more in-depth conversation that needs to happen there, or at least I want to be able to give my thoughts on the Lions approach to the trade deadline. So definitely keep an eye out for that video, possibly tomorrow evening. But if you're looking for any more information on the Detroit Lions, or if you're just trying to keep up with the latest news, be sure to check out pridedetroit.com. You can catch all the latest articles that we've posted over there. Also, be sure to leave a comment below to let me know what you guys thought of this video. And if you're new to this channel, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to hit that notification bell. That way you can be notified of every new video we upload to this channel, as well as when we go live on this YouTube channel as well, because now Pride of Detroit is going live on YouTube. So if you want to be notified of every time we go live, be sure to hit that notification bell. But once again, guys, I'm Miko. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and I'll catch you in the next one.